Hello, BookTube. This is week 2 of Horror Mayhem, and it's the end of week 2, actually. And it was Gothic week, and I had planned on reading a few other things this week, but because the first week sort of didn't go quite as planned, I pushed one short novel into this week, and that was The Blood of the Vampire by Florence Merritt. And that was published in 1897 originally. This is the 2009 Valancourt Books edition with an introduction by Brenda Hammack. And it's a vampire book, 1897, so it's the other vampire book from 1897. And the one that's most famous is obviously Dracula by Bram Stoker. But there also was another vampire, at least one other, that was 1897. There was a poem by Rudyard Kipling called The Vampire. And it has, I suppose, more in common with this book than they do, or this does, with Dracula. Dracula is supernatural. This one is, but it isn't, sort of, maybe, possibly. It's about a young woman who grew up in Jamaica. Her parents were killed when she was quite young, before she was even a teenager. She was put into a convent. And she's just sort of, as she doesn't use the word, but she didn't like the convent, so she would have liked to escape. And she's in Belgium. She's inherited her parents' money, and she's in Belgium and sort of meeting with other groups of society, mostly English, but also German baron and baroness that live in England. And the scene opens up first of all with in sort of the dining room, and everybody is sort of watching her and sort of revolted in some ways by her eating habits of just sort of, shoveling everything in. And it's very, very rigid societal social structure there. But they find out that who she is, and the money wise and stuff like this. She's quite well off, and she befriends a woman, or tries to, that has a baby, and she's never seen a baby, because growing up in a convent, basically, she's never, there were only children maybe about 10 years old, so she's never even seen an infant. So she's fascinated by the infant and likes to hold it. And the infant starts getting ill, very pale and listless. The baby's mother's doctor friend comes and sort of realizes what's happened, and what this Harriet is the woman that's from Jamaica. He knows who she is. He knows who her parents were. Her father was a mad scientist that would do vivisection and other tests on live patients, and usually slaves and other workers that were old or whatnot, or not even just old. And her mother was a her mother, Harriet's mother, was half black and half white. The father was some English person, I can't remember what. But they never married. The parents never married, and she was considered evil as well. And while she was pregnant, she got bit by a vampire bat. Now we're getting somewhere. So the doctor thinks that this is, flowed down through the blood to Harriet, and she doesn't drink blood, but she sucks the life sort of she sucks the life out of somebody she's with, and she's done that to the baby, and the baby eventually dies. And that's not also the bad thing, is because her mother was half black, she's therefore considered like quarter black, so therefore unfit to marry into English society, a white society. There are various levels of racism in this book, and it's unapologetic of how it's depicted, or the characters depicted. There is a little speech that Harriet makes about a memory that she had, because they asked her, like, does she remember her parents? And she barely does, because her father was always in the laboratory. She never hardly saw him, and her mother she never hardly ever saw. She was taken care of by a black servant who was the only person that she really knew and was befriended by, but in a possibly strange way. But she talks about it, and I'm not going to read the words, because it's the I guess you'd say the N word that she uses for black people. Because this person Pete was an overseer, and this gets the sort of the worst part of the racism. There it says of the estate and N word. We had plenty of on the coffee plantation, regular African fellows with woolly heads and blubbery lips and yellow whites in their eyes. When I was a little thing of 4 years old, Pete used to let me whip the little for a treat. When they had done anything wrong, it used to make me laugh to see them wriggle their legs under the whip and cry. It's whoa! It's like right there. But then, see, this is the thing that's interesting about this, because there's different levels. And the woman she's talking to, she goes, "Oh, don't, Miss Brandt." Like other people are horrified by the way her depiction of what she's talking, how she's talking about it. However, they're racist as well, because they don't want, black blood into their family, because and that thing. But it's sort of like I say, there's the different levels of racism in this, and it's always the characters that do this. But the writer, she Florence Merritt, she has the characters being offended, or having a certain level of racism, but their racism sort of falls in with their level of snobbish of society, of societal levels, which is kind of interesting too, because it's also these levels, because there's, as I mentioned, there's a German baron and baroness, and they run a boot company in England. They manufacture boots. But she, the Baroness, always is talking about meeting royalty and everything like this. But she's quite, as they would say, common, uneducated. And when she speaks all the time, like the speech in there, she drops her H's. So anytime she's going to say hat, she'll say at, or av for have, us for out, for house, and so on. She can't say her H's in front of a word. And so she's looked down upon because of this. Because they have lots of money and they spend a lot of money. But anyway, that's the sort of the milieu that it's in. And each one has their prejudices, their racism, but to varying degrees. There's really not a nice person in here. No, there really isn't. There really isn't a nice person. Well, there's one that's possibly a nice person, who winds up marrying Harriet at the end, because he doesn't care about that she's, her background and everything. But is it Gothic? Now that's the question. When I was reading this, and I'm going, yeah, in a loose sense, it sort of is. It's considered a Gothic novel, but it's not. certain things don't jump out. There's the family history that sort of, the rot, the horribleness of slavery and what her father did. The vivisection, the mad scientist, and her mother was insane, and they were both slaughtered, basically killed um, by locals, and the house was burned down. She just barely escaped with her life. Well, thanks to this servant they had. So there's that part, and but there's no sort of rickety old castle or anything like that. However, and I think this might be stretching it a bit, but she does stay, like, they're always pretty well indoors, or most of the action is indoors, so there is an architectural aspect to it. She stays with the barons in England, so she's in a house that, from all intents and purposes, would look like a upper class societal family. But when you look closer, it's not. They sort of reminded me of the Osbournes, where you look at you see these clips, or I never watched it, but I see this, like Ozzy Osbourne. They're eating out of like gold plates or something like this, and they got all this stuff around. But you just sort of listen to them, and they're definitely not of that cultural or societal level, and that's where I think it's showing in here, that the house has the appearance of this, but they're not of that societal level. It's a bit of a stretch, but it does, I guess, work, and that's where I did a little video on what sort of Gothic is, or what I sort of think of it as, and that's where authors, they do mold the traditional Gothic into a few other things. And it's sort of, the question remains, how far can you mold it? How far can you go before you're not, you've gone too far and it's no longer anything to do with the original? That's a big question. But all in all, I enjoyed this. She's a very clean, concise writer. It goes through, it's very slow. There's really not a lot that happens. Somewhere along the line, because I was reading this and I'm going, there's a heck of a lot of exclamation marks in this. And it's like everything's emphatic and dramatic. Everything that's said. And I was like, oh, that's a little strange. And it's a little over the top, to put it mildly. But then I read the introduction after I read this, and like that's noted too, whether they left those in there because that's the way it was published. In I didn't say when it was. Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's 1897. So they left that. They left all that in there. And they also noted a whole bunch of question marks as well. I noticed a few of those, but it was the exclamation marks that were the biggest thing for me. It was extremely dramatic. As a vampire novel, obviously it's a little different, because she doesn't suck blood, and she's out in the daytime, and she just sort of sucks the life force somehow out of them, and it's sort of attributed to a physical thing that she doesn't even know. Like, she's not aware, or she hasn't been aware, and she's finally made aware that she does this. And I won't spoil the ending or anything like that, and how she sort of finds out. But yeah, it's a very different vampire, and this it was mentioned like that. Jason Harrogate mentioned that in a comment, because I read The Mummy, that there was a book about a mummy, and it wasn't what I was expecting. So I went into this with a different frame of mind, and I did enjoy it. It's just another aspect of a vampire, and that's where I said it's a little more probably connected to, if you want to connect it to Rudyard Kipling's poem The Vampire, where there's a woman who's she uses her wiles sort of to uh, destroy men. It's like, and that's where I think the vamp came from, especially later. Uh, it was made. It's Rudyard Kipling's poem was made into two films: 1913, The Vampire, and 1915, the one that's known is A Fool There Was, with Theda Bara. And if you look at her name backwards, it's Arab and then death, but it's Theda, but you just take the A and you put it from the first to the third letter, and it's Arab death. So that's, and I think that's where the vamp term came from. Actually, was from that film, and it's almost like in that kind of thing where women sort of are sort of bring men down and suck their sort of life out of them, in a sense, like the vamp type thing, and in here a little bit, but it can be women as well that she would take that life force from. But that aspect of women destroying other lives is a common thing, and I don't know. It's an interesting thing, might be, to look at. Was it something that was, this author decided to take it, as, and there are a few other vampire novels that have that kind of thing, where there's a female vampire that they sort of, suck the life out of other people. And I don't know where it originally started, but I'm assuming it was a theme or a trope that was around in fiction, and then it was appropriated by people who decided to write a vampire story. That sort of makes sense, because it is something that continued on, and as well as non-vampire. Not so much in the stories I'm thinking of, because I mentioned silent film. So I will need to mention Louise Brooks. So I'll do that first. Pandora's Box, that was written in filmed in 1929, a German film, and it's about a woman who sort of, with her beauty, she destroys men, in a sense. And that's based on two plays that were written in 1895 and then 1904 by, I forget his first name, but Wedekind or Wedekind. I don't know the pronunciation. But the first play is, the English translation is Earth Spirit, and the second play is Pandora's Box. And that sort of is a woman who is beautiful, and it has that aspect even in the plays, but it's brought out more in the film. But it's not connected to this. She's not a vampire, but it's that trope or that storyline that, as I say, I don't know where it started. I don't think it would have started with the vampire, but it was appropriated by people who were writing vampires, at least two that I can think of, or more than that, like novel wise. So anyway, it was an enjoyable read. There's nothing like Dracula. I don't think that's the thing. Dracula has so much for it. It's fast paced, even though it's letters. It's an epistolary novel, and diaries. It works. There's a lot of action in it. This one is slow and meandering, but also enjoyable, because the characters, like, there's really like I say, there's one character that is somewhat likable, I figure, but you don't really get to know him that well, because all you get to know him mostly is through the lovemaking sort of between him and Harriet, and that's all. Everybody else is, not very nice. for a variety of reasons. They're out for themselves, for their family, for society, and look down upon everybody else. And they look down upon each other for different reasons, and opposite reasons at times. Um, so that is, and I think that's the one thing that makes this novel kind of interesting, is because of that. And I don't know. There's lots of studies of social aspects of society, but this one is brutal. Like I say, it's brutal in the sense, like that quote that I read there. Now, you read it with the words, the words that are actually in there. It makes it brutal, and clearly it was brutal for the time, and it was meant to be that. It was trying to show what this person was like, and through the dialogue, it's not a thing saying that this is what the author says, because I don't know what the author believes, but it's the character saying that, and there's the rebuttal of it, that people are shocked by it. So it's clear to me, it's abundantly clear that the author is not saying this is correct. But it does say in the back here, I like this thing, it says one of the strangest novels by the prolific Florence Merritt. So it was one of the strangest for her, but I think it's a strange vampire novel as well. But as I say, if you're going to read it, I would say just go into it and realizing that there's going to be morals and societal issues that are here today, but not maybe as pronounced. And also, you have to sort of get used to or ignore all the exclamation marks that there was a bit odd, because everything is so emphatic and so dramatic, overdone in that way. But if you sort of ignore that and read it for what it is, it was good. And it was, like I say, it's well written in the sense that it's not difficult. It's a very easy book, or at least I think it's easy. And I normally would have said that, but something's come up recently of a book that I always thought was very easy to read, and people are having trouble with it. So that's written about the same time. But anyway, that's week 2 of Horror Mayhem. That's the end of week 2, Gothic. And next week is Cosmic Horror, and I'll be reading, I don't know exactly yet, but a few H.P. Lovecraft short stories. Take care, BookTube.